That was weird. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ryan Ride Mechanic channel. How the heck are you doing today? Alright, today's video, we're going to be talking about X2. Well, I guess we're not going to be talking about X2. But we're going to be talking about building possibly the next version of it. So let's get right into that.
Now get ready. Here we go.
I can't help but listening to the intro of that ride and just like, oh man. I get Enter the Sandman stuck in my head every single time. Because that's just, if you don't have it stuck in your head right now, it's like,
I'll be watching you. 1, 2, 3.
There you go. Back in 2002-ish, roughly somewhere right around there, by being Aerodynamics, built a fourth dimensional roller coaster called X. Later revamped a handful of years later to X2. This is at Magic Mountain in Southern California. In 2006, it basically got its upgraded brother built over there in Fuji-Q Highland in called Engineika, if I'm saying that right. Probably not. But that one was basically lessons learned from building X, and they moved in and built Engineika after that. From what I'm told, I haven't ever ridden on that myself. I'm told that's the superior model, definitely. So someone emailed me and asked the question, hey, do you think that they would build more fourth dimensional roller coasters? Well, they, being the original Aerodynamics, is not possible anymore because Aero's out of business. But S&S is taking over all of Aero's stuff, so they offer repair and fabrication. And on S&S's website, the fourth dimension roller coaster is still an option. You could actually still get specs for it and possibly install a model. So the question became like, would anybody do that? Well, probably not. Probably no one would buy another one of those models again, but there's reasons behind that, and I wanted to go into some of those for this video. This is not going to be a video about the problems with like Engineika or X2. It's not going to be a video about those rides. This video is about doing this ride, those type of rides over again in the next generation style, like moving up, progressing. So it's not about what's been done in the past. I'm going to use some lessons learned from those ones in the past, but this is basically about the future, what's going to happen in the future for these rides. So to say why they're not going to build more of these rides in the future, the answers, there's basically 3 prongs on it. It's pretty simple and straightforward. They're too big, they're too complicated, they're too heavy. Those 3 things put together, it's not a good combination for a roller coaster. So the project is essentially dead. The S&S fourth dimension roller coaster is essentially dead. It's not going to be purchased again. Now, it's still on the website. You could still buy one, absolutely. But I don't think any park, anybody is going to be going to them to purchase another one of them because of all the problems that they've had in the past. I mean, it was a revolutionary idea when Aero did it, and it's definitely something that put them on the map. Unfortunately, in a bad way too, it also basically took the company out of business, and they had to redesign the trains to make them more functional. Again, not really going to dive into that during this part of the video. So basically, the question becomes, can they do a version 3, right? X was version 1, X2, because they just revised it, so I'm going to call that version 1.5. Then Engineika was version 2. So can they revamp it and do a version 3? And I think they can do a version 3. In fact, I think, be completely honest about it, I think a bunch of different manufacturers can do a version 3. Some are very close to that as it sits right now. The question really goes down to the patent of doing the fourth dimensional process, but I think that's up for grabs as well. So the first thing that caught everybody off guard was the size of these trains. These trains are huge, they're massive, and they weigh so much. So the size, they're the width of a massively wide train, which way back in the days was a new thing that we had not seen before. Now it occupies almost the same exact space as a wing coaster, like B&M wing coaster. They're almost the same exact size. X at Magic Mountain X2, I believe, is still a little bit wider, but close. Okay, so the size is there. Length, the trains are much longer for. I'm gonna be comparing everything with X2 here, just because that's the one I have experience with. So I'm gonna do that. But the trains are a lot longer, and the reason for that is on a wing coaster, you're able to sit people front to back, and there's not much you can do. You can pretty much, as the train chortles, the seats will get closer and further away from each other. So depending on how the train chortles, dictates how far back the next coach is set from the first one. Now, you still have that exact same chortle on the fourth dimension style coasters, but the seats also rotate 360 degrees around, so there's an added clearance envelope inside of the chortling. So now you have two round clearance envelopes that as the train chortles, they can't touch each other. So realistically, this is one of the main reasons you don't see these vehicles out there doing like crazy turns and things like that, because when the vehicle turns, if you're looking at one row here and one row here, as it goes around the track this way, as it curves to that side, basically the train does this, and those two rows have to get close to each other. Those two clearance envelopes need a lot of space. So the only way to space them out is to make the train further and further and further apart. Not really good. So that's one of the reasons why the tracks mimic that out and back style. Now, because of the fourth dimensional process of rotating people around the outside, you don't need a lot of zigzag corners and stuff around the ride, because it's not necessary. You can simply just flip the direction of people and send the train back the other way. That's why most of these rides are considered more like an out and back style. And like X2 at Magic Mountain, when you go around that really big, I think it's called a Raven turn around the outside, that's why that vehicle pretty much almost goes up on knife edge as it goes around the outside, because they didn't want to have those two coaches chortle next to each other like that. So the way they got around it was to twist it up on its side and pull it around like you would an airplane doing a maneuver, where you go mainly all in banking and then use elevator to bring yourself back around instead of using mostly rudder around the outside. In the old trains, the weight is astronomical on those things. It's way more than any roller coaster weighs out there. I believe those are pretty much the heaviest trains in the industry. I can't guarantee that because the weight's kind of up for grabs on those things. I heard a lot. I heard it's like 70 tons for one of those trains, which is a lot. You consider something like a Boomerang at a park weighs about 8 tons. An SLC weighs about 10 tons. A B&M, like a floorless, inverts, I believe, as well, they're right around the 12-ton mark. An Intamin is around the 12 to 14-ton mark, somewhere right around there. Those are pretty good-sized trains. And now here you're talking about a vehicle that's 70 tons. Like, I'm not sure of the exact number. I just know it's a lot. And the reason is there was an exact number, and then once they turned it from X to X2, that number changed drastically. So there's a number that's floating around out there. I don't know what it is. Honestly, I'm waiting for L2 Orion's video to come out on that one, because when he dives into stuff, man, he gets some good information on that. I will watch those videos. But I'm not sure of the exact weight on that thing. So, but that was a problem. That was a big problem. That's a lot of weight going around there. I remember I went to an AIMS seminar, AIMS, Amusement Industry Safety, Amusement Industry. Oh, heck, I don't remember what it is. I went to the AIMS seminar, and I was there at US Tsubaki's stand. And Tsubaki, spelt with a T, by the way, US Tsubaki is a chain manufacturer. They build chains, and they have a specific line for amusement park chains. And I was looking at this big monster of a thing sitting there. It was this giant chain clip sitting there. It had this huge barrel with these big fork arms on it. It was like machined. I was like, one link was 60 pounds. And I was just like, what is that? And he says, you know the ride X at Magic Mountain? I was like, yeah. He's like, that's a chain link for it. I was like, holy crap. It was just insane how big that thing was. So to do that, you need that big chain, which I'm sure has to be a couple of $100,000, if not closer to $1 million every time they replace that chain. So you need a big chain, but you need a big motor. That thing uses 2 drive motors at the bottom to turn the gearbox, to turn the chain, to lift that 70-ton train up there. You can see where the weight is such a problem. And then that weight out on the track produces all sorts of stress and cracks and things like that out on the track. These early revision models, they were out there welding the crap out of those things all the time. But on prototype style rides, this is normal. This is actually just part of the process. These things happen. So weight is a massive factor. So the biggest thing that you have to focus on for these rides for version 3.0 is going to be the train. Obviously, that is the thing. So what has changed between now and then? Because a little while ago, I would have said, well, your version 3.0 wouldn't have been possible because the technology hasn't gotten to that point yet. But there are manufacturers out there, 2 of them right off the top of my head, that's Intamin and Vekoma, which are doing controlled spin vehicles. These are vehicles like Guardians of the Galaxy, Cosmic Rewind, Epcot. That's a Vekoma, it's a controlled spin, which means it's got a motor spinning a gearbox with a ring gear on the bottom there to position the cab in a very particular way as you go around the track. And Intamin is now doing the same exact thing at their Fast and the Furious Hollywood Drift Coaster that they're putting in Hollywood right now and Universal Hollywood, and I believe they're going to build a second one for Florida. But they're doing the same exact thing with that. So it's off of those 2, and I know Mac's done some stuff as well, but for that continually running process where you have to keep the coaster going cycle after cycle after cycle with those motors, it's right now in my mind it's Intamin and Vekoma. I'm sure there's another 1 or 2 out there, but that's who it is in my mind. We're going to use that technology. So we're going to use the platform of a B&M wing coaster to think about this 3.0. If you could think about a B&M wing coaster, that is the style vehicle that I'm thinking of. Now, because the seats will be rotating, you will have to space it further apart, which means it will need more chortling effect, which means that as the track curves around, you need that belly that's in the center of the train to go down lower in the track, which means your rails are going to naturally have to be higher up away. This is where you get so much away from like the straight back and forth of the track, and you get more into a C-shaped like that. The key is going to be supporting that. Or you could design a train in such a way where instead of having the belly down low, you can make it up higher, but then braking becomes an issue because you have to make your brake fins much shorter and keep them further apart, which reduces your braking force once you get into a brake run. So everything has its trade-off. One's track manufacturing, the other one is some braking issues that you might have slowing down the vehicle. But we use that base, we put that out there, and then you add the seats off to the side. Now, the seats on the old X vehicles, they were really interesting things. They had that 4-way butterfly restraint on there. Super cool stuff. Groundbreaking for the time, absolutely. Now we have vest restraints. Now, could a vest restraint be used on a 4th dimension coaster? I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure because of the rotation. It's the rotation that throws you off. On a wing coaster, you can absolutely use those vest restraints. The same with a flying coaster, you can use those on there because the ride is not trying to punch you out of the thing like kicking a football. It's not doing it. So your forces in all directions are very gradual. It's an even change. It's not a big deal. When you add rotation to it, you think about adding rotation into that cycle, and then you can start being pushed out of the bottom of your seat in a very unnatural way. So this is where I'm thinking you might have to hold the person more captive in the seat than just a standard vest restraint. So this is why I'm thinking like a flying seat, but instead of coming back up like you would on a B&M flying coaster, the seats are just sitting off to the side. So those would be the seats. I'm going to use flying seats off to the side, so it has a nice mechanical anchor down around your waist. It's got the nice vest, comfort collar type deals to hold you in up on top, which have proven to be very effective. And it's got something around your ankles just to keep your knees pinned into the ride. That way your forces exerted around during a spin aren't too far out of there. I know a lot of people would say, look, S&S is already doing this exact same thing with their free spin models. We've all seen free spins out at the parks. Most parks have a free spin these days. The free spin models are already doing this, and they don't need all that other stuff. They don't need to keep the legs pinned. That is correct. But in my mind, I'm not sure of what the engineering is. I'm not an engineering person. But I just know when you go from the natural rotation of how you're going along that track on outside free spin, and you start doing controlled motion and controlled spin to put your body into different positions, it might be different. It might be completely unnecessary. I'm not the person that has to sign that document. Right? We're just talking about cool things here. Like, wouldn't this be cool if? It's like, yeah, it would. So I'm going to use like a B&M flying seat on the outside of a wing style coaster. Now, in the center where that comes up to there, we're going to use a geared slewing ring, kind of like what's used on X right now. It's just a big slewing ring that sits between the seats and the coach, and it's got a gear on top of it. Now, this is where we're going to leave the old Aero/S&S design, and we're getting away from that. One of the reasons the trains are so flippin' heavy on that ride is because they have another roller coaster on the inside of that train. Remember, the track on the old S&Ss had 2 rails that the train would run on and 2 rails that would control the spin of the seats. Well, we're going to get rid of those. We're going to keep the 2 rails that the train is going to run on, and in fact, we're going to make those wider and further apart for more stability out to the further edges. They're going to open up that track gauge a lot further than what it is right now. And then we're going to get rid of the control rails completely. We're not going to use them. What are we going to do in its place? Well, that geared slewing ring on the outside of the seats is now going to go to a small pinion, which is going to drive across to another pinion on the other side and attach with a gearbox and motor in the center. Now, I could use 2 gearboxes and 2 motors. What I do is I increase the weight there, which I don't want to do because that adds more stress into the track, more stress into the frame. I don't want that at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 1 gearbox with a beefier motor that sits between those 2 seats, those 2 seat pods, 1 on each side. And then in the middle of the vehicle, this is where we're going to have to add batteries and a charging system and all the other stuff. Now, to charge this, we're going to put inductive chargers basically in the brake run. The entire time I have control of that thing, I'm going to charge it. So I'm going to charge it in the brake runs, the reduction runs, the transfer track sitting there. I'm going to charge that in the station. Charging the vehicle's backup is going to be key. On the rides that are out there right now that use this geared technology where they have the motors spinning the vehicle the entire time, charging is a thing. Now, one thing that those rides don't have to compete with is that the motion in which you rotate one of those vehicles is going to be a lot less drastic than what you would need to do on a 4th dimension coaster. I'm going to say the motion profile of, let's say, Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm going to say it's like about that times 4 in half the time. It's going to be a lot. So the gear ratio between the slewing ring and the pinion gear and the gearbox and the motor, that stuff is going to be critical to elongate the battery life in the vehicle. Now, one of the things that you might want to do is take the vehicles and cut them in half lengthwise and make them much narrower and literally double the vehicles out there. If you're originally going to do 4, you could do 2 on the track. You were going to do 4 now. So you get double the vehicles out there. What that might allow you to do is if you were having trouble earlier on in the day, you can leave 1 or 2 off and let them charge. And then while the other 2 are running, you could pull 1 out and put it back into service, and then eventually take 1 offline and let it charge some more as well. Another thing to do would be an AB loading station. We all love AB loading stations, but one of the good features that does is that allows that train to sit there longer in one position to get more of a base charge on those batteries. So you can use those electric motors out on the track and rotate the thing around. Now, because we're using an electric motor to spin people all the way around, we're going to have to reduce some of the forces out on the track. By that, I mean we have to consider failure modes for the vehicle. So I'm going to figure that whatever my highest G-force is, I'm going to take the people's pod and I'm going to rotate them into the absolute worst position for that highest G-force and figure out, is that acceptable? Like if you're doing a big pull up out of a loop or something like that, that G-force down, if it goes 2.5 G's down, if I put myself head down into that situation, are those G-forces on my body still going to be acceptable in that position? Now, if the answer is it's just a very tiny little bit of G-force in a very narrow window, then the answer is going to be yes. That's kind of the way the free spins work right now. It's like the G-force is applied in those weird directions, such a small little narrow snippet, it doesn't really affect the safety rating of the ride. But in this, you would have to plan for someone being stuck in that position the entire time. Now, at the end, when you come down into the brake run and come into the station, you're going to have movable platforms that come up and down, or you're going to have to ensure the people are in a safe position before you bring them into a low platform area, because typically on these rides, the platforms or the loading dock areas where you would get on and off the vehicle, those are typically within your little seat bubble range. That's one of the reasons why when you dispatch out of like X, that's one of the reasons they rotate the seats back. It pulls your feet and stuff up away from the ground so you can't roll an ankle up underneath there. So you have to do the same thing, whether it's electronically or physically. So physically it would be to lower the platform. When the train comes back in, raise the platform back up. Takes a long time to do, more mechanical components, more things to fail. So what I would do is I would say, okay, we're going to say I am going to rotate the vehicle into the right position, and then as I start getting close to the station, I'm going to check, I'm going to get it into a bus system, and I'm going to light up all the sensors on the train, and I'm going to check to make sure that all the pods are in the correct position. On top of that, each pod is going to have essentially a roller arm. It's a cam, basically, that would sit underneath there. So that cam sits down in the very bottom corner at the lowest spot. And there's a little limit switch or a proximity sensor out on the track, maybe 2 of them, that are just before the station. And as that comes by, that wheel or that flag would basically flag the proximity sensor as it comes across. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for that count. I'm looking for the train to come by, and I'm looking for my wheel carriers to count. And at the same time, the flag counts. And if I ever get the wheel carrier counting without the flag, I send the ride into an e-stop. I say, wait a minute, someone's seat pod is out of position, and we have to fix that. So don't send the train any further. We have to fix the out of position problem, which is overrideable. Get a couple people, override the motor brake, rotate the pods whatever direction they need to be, manually advance the train in from there. Got all that stuff figured out. Not a big deal. So one of the things, the reason why the thing shakes so much is that the track distance was too narrow. The gauge was too narrow. So we're going to make that wider. A lot of the shaking is from the second set of wheel carriers that have to sit underneath on those control rails. So we're getting rid of them as well. That's a lot of weight too. All that stuff, more time, more space to put batteries in, because we're going to need more batteries. The capacity of batteries on this ride is going to have to be a lot higher than the Intamin or the Vekoma trains are right now. So we got to get more batteries into that thing. Now, with a newly redesigned train that sits at a roughly same size and shape, but maybe a little bit narrower in some spots, wider in others, the new drive mechanisms with the spur ring gear on the side of them, that won't really change the size of anything. All that stuff will pretty much still be within the same size vehicle. So that really doesn't change too much. But what we've done is we've taken a lot of weight off. Now that we've taken all the weight off of the thing, we can now go back through and start downsizing the rest of the ride. We can take the lift hill, not height-wise, and make it smaller, but we can use less motors. We can use a smaller chain. The train becomes more manageable at that point. We can move it around easier because there's not, let's say on a 8-coach train, where you would have roughly 16 wheel carriers on there, depending on how you want to design it. If there's a tail coach, it would be 18. But instead of 18 wheel carriers like those original trains, those original trains had 36 wheel carriers on them, not 18, because remember, they were doubled. Everything was doubled. So you got rid of all that weight and all that componentry, and now all the thing is nice and light. So it runs a lot smoother and faster out on the track. You can control the spin. You can control what position people are in where. You could even come in and reprogram the thing and get it to where it's a new ride every once in a while, or there's multiple different cycles on the things. The opportunities are really vast. One of the things a lot of people and myself would want to see is some sort of turning, but it really doesn't work for these trains. Because of the width of them, to do a hard right-hand turn, it just doesn't work because they chordle too much. And the seats will essentially run into each other if you turn it too hard. Lower speeds, making U-turns and stuff where you have a lot of control in the area, that's one thing. Out on the track, it's kind of different. But I believe when you play with the spacing and all this stuff, and you can get the weight of the vehicle in such a way where it doesn't put so much demand between coaches, I believe the spacing, I had a thought while I was editing this. You can add intermediate coaches in between the main coaches. By that I mean, think of like a pilot car with no seats on them, but it's essentially a chassis with wheel carriers to add that extra spacing where the train can chordle more without affecting anything else. So it's like making the train longer but not having to really mess with the track dimensions to do it. It would work out to be just fine to where you could encounter a normal, I would say a normal track layout, not the S&S original design, or I should say the Arrow original design, where it's more like the out and back. I would love to see one of these get close to the ground and become almost like a terrain coaster. That would be really cool to see. Something like that is kind of what I'm picturing in my mind. Some of the things that are the classic staples, the vertical drop where you go down face first and then roll over, it's like, absolutely. Still do those classic design elements in there. That stuff is really cool. I think it is a super cool idea that you could just be out there just going through a simple like little camel hump hill or something like that, and you get the full 360-degree rotation. Now, the difference is, with these new vehicles, you would not have to be limited to, like, the old vehicles could only go one way, and then once they were one way, they had to go back the other way, because now the ratchet, the linear gears were all the way at the bottom. So you had to bring people back the other way to get that gear back up to the top where it needed to be. This way, you don't have to do that. If you want to give people and make this look like a roller coaster tycoon video and just have the thing sitting there spinning off to the side, you could do that if you wanted to. It's a possibility. Now, what's some of the really interesting things about this? If manufacturers wanted to pick that up, notice I said manufacturers, S, plural on there. I don't think anything's stopping somebody like B&M from doing this. S&S can do this. Their original model could be retrofitted to this. Absolutely, you could retrofit that model to this new design. B&M could also do this. I mean, Intamin can do this, Vekoma can do this, Mach can do this. Like, you name the manufacturer, like, anyone can do this, because they're going to use platforms that already exist. They're going to use their ride models that already exist in the vehicles technology that exists already. But I honestly do feel that if anybody is going to make version 3.0, it's probably going to be S&S. They're going to be the ones to do it because they have the model, they have the knowledge, they know what worked and what didn't work. So where everyone else would be up on this research and development curve, and it would be a complete unknown that could bankrupt their company, like roller coasters tend to do, S&S has already got the groundwork laid. They know everything. It's simply a retrofit for them. I think they could retrofit something like an Ingenika or an X2 into a new vehicle and breathe some new life back into the ride. The shaking, if everyone's going to ask, hey, what do you think about the shaking at the end of X2? It's like, that's still going to be there. That's a track width problem. But I think getting rid of half the wheel carriers on the train is going to fix a lot of that. And that back and forth in the seat that you get in that same section, once you get rid of those linear gears and make it back to a drive motor, that's going to fix a lot of it as well. So it'll be way better, don't get me wrong. It's going to be way better if someone were to do that. But yeah, that was a thought. Someone said, hey, you think they would ever build these rides again? I'm like, let's talk about this one. Anyways, what do you think? Do you have you think one of these would ever get sold? Do you think this retrofit is even possible? I know there's way more engineering people that watch this channel than care to admit. Let me know what you think. I won't necessarily understand the math, but maybe if you could dumb it down enough and I can understand it, I think that would be a good thing. If you want to, you can leave a comment downstairs about it or email me. My email is ryantheridemechanic@yahoo.com. And as always, stay off the air gates. Bye.
It was a wild, crazy, insane experience. It's like Jekyll and Hyde, you know?